Okay, our last video here is on a really powerful feature called Camera Raw. So I have a raw image here taken on a Canon camera. You'll notice the extension is CR2. It's one of the three types of raw images they have. So I'm going to right click on here and, oops, that's not what I want to do. I want to open this with Camera Raw, so I'm going to right click on this one actually. Open in Camera Raw, and I will get a new window. And I'm going to make this a little bit bigger just so that's all we can see. So here's my camera. It's obviously, or my image, it's obviously a little underexposed. The sky's a little dark. And you'll notice I have a whole bunch of controls here. And under each one of these there's different detailed controls. This whole thing works best with RAW. It will work on JPEG, but it's really, really good in RAW, and that's really what you should be using. I can control the exposure here, so I can add a stop of light just like that. You'll notice there's a little bit of red bits showing up. That's because I have highlight priority turned on. That means I'm starting to blow it out, so I'm losing detail in there, but I can turn that on and off. I can also turn on low light or darkness, shadow clipping if you want to call it that. So you'll notice down in here there's some blue. That means the blacks are so black there's no detail. So I can play with the exposure, and the nice thing about a raw image is that if you are underexposed, because it hasn't been compressed, you can use these settings to bring it back even from the point where it's pretty far gone. So it's kind of a cool program. I can change the color temperature. I can make it very warm. I turn this off up here, or I can make it very cool. Okay, if you double click on these, they should return to their original shooting value, so 50-50. Clarity is something I use a lot of. Raw files being uncompressed tend to be a little soft, so clarity is one way of bringing some of that back. Vibrance affects just some of the primary colors. Saturation affects all colors. Contrast, difference between black and whites, and you can play with all of that in here. Recovery is one way to get back. If I turn on the highlight clipping, you'll notice the red flicks on there. If I use my highlight recovery, okay, I can bring it back, but it also dulls the photograph down a bit, so you have to be careful how much you use that. I like the little bit of pop in the leaves. Fill light, kind of a uh, medium range if you want to think of it that way, bringing up the midtones. Blacks, works on obviously the black. So that's just one option. You can go through, there's the curves, just like you'd find in Photoshop. I don't particularly care for it, but you can also see it as highlights, lights, darks, and shadows. Some people really like working with that, and that's cool. Sharpening, as I said before, a lot of raw images come out kind of soft. So if you hold down Alt when you click on here, I'm going to click on masking. Masking is one way that you can limit where the sharpening is going to take effect. So on a person's face, for example, you would see that this masking would just go to the edges and the lines where you want to have sharpen and stay away from the skin. So you can see up in the top there, I could sharpen the clouds and a lot of the tree. I can continue to hold down Alt and click on the amount. It goes to a black and white, and you can see how much it's going to sharpen. This is best done at a 1-to-1 or 100%, so you can see the detail. So I'm going to click on here now, and I can play with that. You probably won't be able to see it very well in the video, but there's sort of a magic point where everything just pops and looks really sharp. If you over sharpen it, you can create a halo effect, and that looks terrible. It's really subtle at first, but then once someone points it out, you see that little halo everywhere. Noise reduction, sometimes you'll see grain in a film photograph. Well, noise is the equivalent in a digital photograph. You start to see little dots everywhere. This image is shot at ISO 200, so it's pretty much grain free. Yeah, it looks pretty cool. That's at 200%, so I'm going to back off to about 50% so you can see a little bit more of the image. I can also use the HSL and grayscale. Just by clicking on the grayscale, it turns it to black and white. The HSL stands for hue, saturation, and luminance. So hue, you can change some of the hues. I very seldom play with that one, but saturation I do and luminance I do. So if I wanted to make the blue sky darker or brighter, I can click on the luminance, grab the blues, and drag them down, and you'll see all the blues in the sky just get even more dark. This is really good in combination with the grayscale because that's where you start to see the real dark sky coming out, and I'm almost making this look like an infrared image. I can take those yellows, darken them a little bit, or brighten them up a little more. I can take the greens and brighten them all up. You can also see a bit of a halo effect starting. But that's working in grayscale with the HSL. I can also return back to color, okay, and play with those. So this picture is pretty saturated to begin with, so I don't really need to change much there. Split toning, I don't do a lot of this. This is for pictures that have basically two tones. Not my thing, but just so you know it's there. Lens corrections, if you know you have certain aberrations or effects in your lenses that have little issues or problems, you can correct them here, and so when you apply that lens or have that lens, you can apply the correction to it pretty quickly. Grain, again, if you want to add grain to a photo and make it look, there we are, it's starting to show up a little more like an old black and white, you can do that. You can see down here there's some grain showing up. It can be artistic and very cool. I personally don't care for it in this photograph. What I do like is post-crop vignette. This is a real fast and easy way to get a vignette on a photo and drag the attention down to just the tree. And all it's doing is it's putting a black ring around here, and you can play with the feather. You can make them very sharp or very feathered. See, you can almost see that now. There, I'm going to just crank that feather right down so you can see it. Alright, so if I play with the feather, I can have it sort of graduate out. I can protect some of the highlights, playing with that. That's what highlight priority is. There's color priority, paint overlay. You just have some fun with it and see which one sort of works for your image. All you have to do is slide them around, double click on them, and it resets back to where it was. Camera calibration, again, you can tie this to a camera if you want. I've never used it. Presets, make your own presets. Snapshots, probably like history, you can use it there. I only use a couple of these features. The preview button up here toggles between small view and full screen view. And over here we have a couple cool tools. Magnify and hand tool, you know those already. Color sampler, this is what sets the white balance. So you'll notice my white balance changed from 50/50 to 5900. So if I click on that, I am choosing what's supposed to be white. There's nothing really super white in this picture. Once I choose it, it kind of gives me a bit better white balance. I liked it the way it was personally. This is a cool tool. This is your sampler. So if you want to measure points and get the RGB values, you can do that. So if I want to know if this is white or not, it's pretty close. If this was pure white, those would all be 255. Clear the samples. This is a neat tool because I can just take this tool, grab, and slide. So what I'm doing is I'm grabbing the blue skies, I'm left clicking, holding it down, and sliding them left and right, or up and down, and it's changing those values automatically for me. So you'll notice I've got parametric curve, which is your highlights, darks, midtones, that sort of thing. I can do hue and saturation, luminance, grayscale mix, and all you do is you click down and drag and go any way you want. So woof, there we go. So I'm just playing. It's kind of a fun tool, a quick tool, but not exactly a precise tool. Cropping, a whole bunch of different ways to crop. Straighten, if I want to straighten the image. Spot removal, someone's got a pimple or something and you just want to do it really quick. You'll notice I can change and move where it samples from, and it will copy it in there. So that's the spot removal tool. We'll get rid of that. Red eye reduction. The adjustment brush, this is really cool. This also shows up in Lightroom. And you'll notice I have two rings here. The dashed ring is the edge of the feather, and the ring on the inside is where the brush is being applied. So if I paint this in here, I'm creating an adjustment area, and right now that says to take away 1.21 stops of exposure. If I bring it back to 0, it looks normal. I can over brighten it, and I can control all of these things: exposure, brightness, contrast, saturation, etc., all based on where I paint. So if I want to paint down here and I need to bring this down a little bit, you can see the area that's affected by the brush just by mousing over there. I can change the size of my brush. If I hold down Alt, you'll notice the changes. So I'm actually subtracting So I'm going to just paint away some of that tree. So now if I go back over that brush, you'll notice that there's a nice clean mask around my tree but not on my tree. Oops, I missed a little bit. So if I wanted to take that saturation and crank it down, I basically created a black and white on that masked layer. That's essentially what it's doing. And these are all non-destructive, so I can get rid of these at any point I want. I can show the mask, turn it off. Okay, I'm just going to double click on that, put it back to where it was. And that's an adjustment brush. That's a really cool tool, very handy. Use it a lot in Lightroom, which we'll talk about. And then lastly, graduated filter, another really cool one. If I want to bring the sky down, I just drag my graduated filter down, just like a gradient in Photoshop, except now I can apply a graduated, in this case, exposure drop from -1.2 down to 0, and it just darkens my sky. Really, really cool tool. Again, available in Lightroom also, but gives you a lot of control before you even start using the image. I'm just going to click on this and try and get rid of it. There it goes. Back to my regular. And then camera raw preferences. You can play with some of that. And I've got some, oops, clicked on that already. Can rotate left and right. So lots of things to play with before you even get into Photoshop. This is a really powerful program, worth playing with, worth using raw images for sure. I think you'll really enjoy it. And yeah, you should really delve in and give it a whirl. It's very, very cool.